Why are our cities getting uglier and uglier? Today I'm having a conversation with my guest, Ruben Hanssen, the Aesthetic City. Ruben, thank you very much for having me in your wonderful studio, and thanks for inviting me to have this conversation in your place. We're sitting here in one of the most beautiful cities in the Netherlands, Amsterdam, high up in your attic studio.
Yeah.
We have some beautiful pictures on the wall. We're going to talk about architecture and your work of spreading the word on why it is that our world, our living environment is getting more ugly by the month, by the year,
day,
by the day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast. It's a show. It's wonderful to talk about this at any possible chance. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I was driving over here, and you can almost feel it because I came from the outer parts of the city because I needed to do a pickup there, and then you have to drive slowly towards the center of the city where you live, and then you see these glass buildings, and then slowly they change, they become smaller, they're made out of stone. And the closer you get to the inner parts of the city, the more ornaments that you get, the more details that you see on the walls, the more wooden doors that you see, the more beautiful the bridges, the more curvy the streets. How do you explain the fact that our modern way of city building, our modern way of architecture is so rigid and so far away from us humans?
So the whole thinking about cities changed, let's say, in the 20th century, because beforehand we had basically a designing tradition that had lasted for hundreds of years. And then we got the industrial city, and we had very bad living circumstances. So there were cholera outbreaks, there were disease, overcramping, there was a lot of pollution, stench, just dirt. And this was really something that everybody in the, let's say, the end of the 19th century, people were really thinking, how do we fix this? And it was a great social issue. So of course there were all the isms started to rise, communism, also fascism, all the political manifestos written at the end of the 19th century, and we started to gain followers at the early 20th century. There were all kind of reactions to this new industrial world. But one of the reactions was, for example, the Garden City by Ebenezer Howard, who really thought, okay, how are we going to have the best of the industrial city with work, but also the best of the countryside? So that was one of the early ideas of urban design that responded to all these issues of overcramping and the dirty industrial city, basically. That was one of the ideas, but there were other ideas. There was also a young Swiss-French architect who had a radical new idea of how to reshape the city, because the car was introduced. There were new building materials as well. He had reinforced concrete. And this architect was Le Corbusier, and he had a plan called the Radiant City. And the Radiant City was a complete, radical new view of how to build cities. It was like a machine, with all the functions were separated, so people would live in high-rise tower blocks. You had highways that connected everything with high-speed traffic. And everything was set in like a park-like setting. So the towers were on stilts, on pilotis, as it's called, like these columns, raising them from the ground. So the whole ground field would be a park in which people could walk around. And this was all to bring light and air and space back in the city. And there were a lot of other thinkers as well who embraced this thinking and This later led to the CIAM, the Congrès International d'Architecture Moderne, who codified all these ideas into best practices for urban design.
Yeah. So I believe the last example that you mentioned, the light, we have a fantastic, terrible example here in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
It's called the Bijlmer.
Yeah. That was basically, I think the Bijlmer is a really good example of the Ville Radieuse, or the radiant city of Le Corbusier, perhaps literally
his vision.
His vision brought in reality. And there's some similar projects, but less extensive, I think. I think you had Pruitt-Igoe in the United States, which was a big failure as well. It has all been blown up already in the 80s, I believe. But it was kind of like an ideal for people, how people should live. So they kind of imposed their ideal way of living on people, and they shaped it in the way they thought was most suitable for the modern age. The problem was, however, that these ideas, separation of functions, separating traffic streams, having this very rational, rigid, utopian design, which could not be changed because it was already perfect and unchangeable, it didn't work. So badly, in fact, that nowadays we don't get this functionist zoning anymore. It's taught to students as a failure as well, but the architecture is still there. The architecture has not changed yet. The architecture went, of course, through a couple of stages. So we had the Modernism, the international style, and we had all these new variations. We had Brutalism, working with raw concrete in very plastic forms, and very expressive. We had we have now like blob architecture. We have the weirdest kind of new experiments with form, because basically all modernism did was cut all the ties with the past, cut all the ties with tradition, to usher in a new age of freedom for the architect to do whatever they wanted. And then we had a little postmodern movement where the strictness of the international style was they started to ironically play with historical references again, to play with the past, but always ironically, never seriously. It was like, oh look, we have this oversized capital here. It was not like a canonically classical capital, like an Ionic capital that you could find in a Vignola treaty or something, treatise. But it would be an oversized, wonky thing. It would be like a weird, clownish thing.
To ridicule, basically.
Exactly, kind of to ridicule, but maybe not to ridicule, to play with it, but it feels like ridiculing if you look at it from a certain perspective. In any case, most of the postmodernists again became modernists. They stopped with their little experiment and they moved back, and they had, like in the Netherlands, you had the Super Dutch, where that produced all these big architects, MVRDV, you had Rem Koolhaas, really going back to the super strict modernism. But basically the style or the way of designing had become kind of a settled dogma. But some of the postmodernists actually stayed within the traditional architectural realm, but they became truly traditional again. They started to really learn all the traditions and started to really immerse themselves in that original thought again, and original craft. And they became a very niche group of traditional designers who still build traditional stuff to this day. Right. But we're now in a world where almost all architecture it's by default is modernist, and it might not always look super like modernist as it did 50 years ago, or 60 years ago, but it has it's still there's still a lot of dogma. You cannot move back to traditional forms. Like ornament is still a crime, as Adolf Loos in his book called it. And it's there's some things that are kind of agreed upon and not agreed upon, and if you have the wrong idea on architecture, you are wrong. So they'll attack you as a person. You get ad hominems. and you get all these reasons, but they're very weakly defended.
So the way for the viewers who are maybe not up to date on this subject, but the way that I understand postmodernist, and please correct me if you have a different perspective, but the idea I think of postmodernist is that when we look at the world, there is no such thing as objectivity. It's all subjective. And that, if you keep that frame of mind, that means that whatever you see and what you experience and what you create in that world thereby is valid because it comes from your own perspective. And that neglects basically the idea that there is something as objective beauty, truth, all of these things that seem to have merit and always have seemed to have merit in the past. For instance, with ancient building cultures, when they would use certain dimensions that were sacred to them. They always have seemed to appear within ancient architecture, and somehow within the postmodernist perspective, we have negated all of that.
So I think what the modernists did was negating it as well, but saying that is wrong, this is the right way, and there is only one right way, and this is kind of the technological optimism of, we can solve every problem with technology and with our new, rationality of mind. Only their rationality wasn't scientific and wasn't empirical and didn't work. We know that from the destruction of the Bijlmer, which happened like only 20, 25, 30 years later than it was constructed and has now largely been completed. But then the postmodernists, they, I think, that whole way of thought of everything is subjective was broader. It was like we know postmodernism, it's also in universities, it's everywhere. It's this subjectivity is everything. So everything can be true because any idea is valid, is equally valid. So maybe that has made it worse because on the one hand, it still has the dogma of the old is bad. So like that determinism and like this is progress, this is newer, so it's better, which we should also talk about. But also it says, but there's no real beauty anyway because everything's subjective, and we have to leave everything to the architect and to his genius, to his artistry, let's say.
Almost like a superior deity that
he transcends the population with his wisdom, and he comes down, with his godlike hand to build architecture that is right for the people, and woe those who have any opinion different than this god architect.
And it's easy to understand where this goes wrong. For instance, I've seen some of these drawings that they make before they build it. You often
renders,
see these renders of these white buildings, and you see a picture of it, and you look at it from a distance, and you think, okay, it might have something, all white walls and everything. And you see like people walking by and a tree in front of it.
A lot of greenery always.
Exactly, and it never turns out to be that green.
No.
But then when you get close to a building like that, you feel it's drafty. You feel that it's not coherent with the space surrounding it.
No.
When you get up close, you're just staring at a blank white wall. It has very little to do with the people that actually have to live and have to be in that space. Therefore, I believe it has something to do with scale. It has something to do with what I call the human scale.
And detail, but also probably it didn't have a cornice, like a ledge on the top of the building to hold back rainwater.
Right.
Well, that's really nice that you build a white building in a rainy climate like the Netherlands, but look at it in 50 years, It
will be green.
It will be green, and there will be like dirty black stripes all the way, and you see it everywhere. Like even in Portugal, I saw this. There was this. I stayed there this January, and I was opposite me was a modern building. And you had this, you saw exactly what the lack of a cornice does to a building. It's just, it gets all dirty. and in a very ugly way. So that pristine minimalism, it will get ruined unless you clean it all the time and you paint it every year. You know,
Right.
it might work in Morocco or somewhere southern Spain, you know, where it's always sunny. Having a completely white facade there, no problem. But try it in England, good luck.
Right.
You know, like it gets so dirty and disgusting, and the Netherlands as well. That, you know, that's the point with these traditions. A cornice is nothing but a traditional architecture that has been passed down for generations to solve a certain problem, which is keeping the facade clean.
Right.
And if you take away, that's the point with traditions. If you take a tradition is a solution to a problem we have forgotten that existed. But if you take the solution away, the problem comes back. And what you get is dirty facades. And we see this everywhere. But that's just one of the things, you know, like we use plastic paints, for example, as well. I just saw that some houses have like these beautiful brick facades and kind of like natural insulation materials. But then they have been painted by plastic paint. So this creates this cover over the stone, and because this paint cover creates little fissures, water gets under it, and it gets underneath this layer of paint, and it kind of wets the brick underneath, and that lowers actually the ability of the building to insulate. So it basically destroys the insulation of the building. So this, I saw this architect who always strips away this paint from his buildings to expose the brick so it can dry, restoring the insulation value of this building. So even something like that, like a material, can drastically change how a building functions, and can our modern solutions can be very stupid and lead to a lot of damage, and we don't think about that. Another fun thing about paints is that they, due to the UV light, they break down and the water washes the little chips of plastic back to the groundwater. So basically, I think paint little microparticles of plastic in the ocean are mostly constituted of the plastics coming from paints using on buildings. Yeah. So our plastic soup is caused by the paint we use for large parts. And then you have when you have bricks and you have like the lime mortar in between. Lime mortar, like the old-fashioned mortar, is kind of flexible, it breathes, it is not like super sturdy and hard like cement. Yeah. So the stones can kind of like settle and you know, the building can like kind of change over time a little bit. It can like, the facade can kind of move a little bit. But cement is so hard that it is immovable. So what happens if you fix an old lime mortar stone wall with cement? You know, the stone wants to move, but the cement won't. So it will chip, and you will get this damage.
On the stone or the cement?
On the stone. The cement will just stay because it's basically kind of concrete. You know,
right.
It's so hard that it was never meant to be used with cement. So a lot of traditional building materials are inherently more sustainable and lead to, first of all, more beautiful buildings, but also to more sustainable buildings. They last longer, and they can actually accommodate heat and moisture. And because it was so simple and it wasn't so like over-engineered, it was more natural and it worked better. And nowadays there are very few builders who actually use lime mortar because it doesn't dry so quickly. Cement, you just put it on and boom, it's dry in a flash of an eye. But lime mortar, you need to do layers more slowly, slowing down the construction process, making it more expensive. But it will end up it will result into a building that will probably last longer, be more beautiful, and actually, like, it can transpire moist. Yeah. So our modern industrial way of building and our industrial way of living, and basically everything that has changed in our modern age, has had a huge impact on our building and our construction.
Yeah, I have this idea that these type of materials that we use, or that we used to use, compared to what we use now, the ones that we used to use, they would be closer to us. Yeah. Lime is something you dig out of the ground. Yeah. a brick is also something you dig out of the ground. You put clay, you fire it, and that's it.
Yeah.
Wood, you take it from a tree.
Yeah.
Straw, you put.
Local materials.
And culture always comes from nature. And now what we have is we have materials that would not exist in our natural environment. We have steel.
Oh yeah.
High carbon steel. We have thick glass walls.
Yeah.
Entire buildings made of thick glass walls.
Chemical insulators.
Exactly. Yeah.
Petrochemical products, basically.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole industry of building materials, and actually, if we go back to using traditional building materials, that industry will be reduced significantly because, it's like this whole world, like, oh, we're gonna sell that, we're gonna create this new material that's ideal for this thing, and you have all these, these fairs where they showcase their latest products, like the newest iPhone, you have the newest insulation material.
Fueled by a capitalistic idea of invention is striving forward.
Yeah. Right. Well, you can also insulate your buildings with wool, or straw. And straw, actually, you think, oh, it will go up in flames immediately. No, it will smolder. It will not burn up like crazy. So there's also a lot of misconceptions about traditional building materials. But I think the bigger question now is that we need to go back to forms that are actually agreeable with a lot of a large part of the population, because we're building stuff that people don't like.
And this is your mission of what you're doing with the Aesthetic City. Fantastic YouTube channel. I recommend you guys all check it out. You're basically on a mission to show the world that there's hope. That there's people out there who understand this, and architects who are trying to make a difference. And you showed me some fantastic examples already. Perhaps we can look at some more of buildings where you wouldn't immediately recognize that they were built recently. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's basically, there's two parts to building nicely. First of all is urban form and like urban design. So building neighborhoods and places we like. So a nice square, a nice street. Very rare to see really nice streets and squares nowadays. It's a lost art. And then you have the architecture.
Can you define what a nice square and what a nice street, what it?
It's very easy. Where do you want to stay and where do you want to go away? If you want to stay somewhere, like if you even want to return somewhere, then you have a really nice place. Like imagine a little, if you want to come back there for just because the place is so nice, not because there's something you need there. Like we all know the old-fashioned, old-fashioned kind of like the modern but outdated shopping mall with like those, like the ugly tiles, the parking in front. The shopping carts.
Very functional.
Yeah, very functional. It's also very often a bit outdated. It's modern design. There's no ornament. It's very functional. So you just go there to get your groceries and you get the hell out. What if you, and often you have like this little square in front of the shop, or like a little street. What if you change that street, instead of like the standard kind of basic tiles? You take more like cobblestone-like pavers, smaller little tiles. Not like the really bumpy ones, but just a little bit flatter. You have a lot of nice ones. You instead of like the functional light fittings, you take nice light fixtures with some ornament. Instead of having like a very functional shed for the shopping carts, you design it with some more style, some elegance, some curves. Nicer materials, maybe even some ornament. You have maybe place a fountain if there's a little square, like a little fountain, and not like a weird artwork, like some sort of I don't know what they build nowadays, but just a very simple basic fountain. Maybe buy a second-hand one from France or something. Then you create some flowing water there. You plant some trees. And if you have money left, you'll revamp the facade of the shopping square. Suddenly you have a place that will be so attractive that people will want to start restaurants there, little bars there, because it's a place where you actually like to sit down and just take in the beauty.
And for the ultimate quality of CBD oil, of course, you want to go to organica-cbd.com. I always forget the dash, but the dash is important. You go to organica-cbd.com, and there you get the most premium quality CBD oil that's out there on the market. You get a 10%, you get a 20%, they have a 30%, and that's the maximum amount that you really need to get your health in check. If you have any problems such as chronic pains or inflammation or whatever, the CBD oil, it helps. If you have problems sleeping, for instance, maybe you're thinking too much. I hope you don't think too much because you're laying awake of these episodes, but if you need that extra little bit of sleep, if you need that extra little bit of rest, you want to have a quality CBD oil. I give it to my dog because my dog, she has some little elderly bumps on her back. It helps. The other day I found out that the little bump that she has on her back, it shrunk. And it now has 2 little bumps. So I'm very curious to find out what that leads to. If you guys need something like that as well in your life, because who doesn't need good quality medicine that is not supported by any pharmaceutical company, but it's just a local mom and pop store that is really good quality, then you want to go to organica-cbd.com. Use the code ParadigmShift. You get a 5% discount. Over 100 euros, you get free shipping. So go over there and help yourself, help out the show, and help out a local mom and pop store. All right, with that said, let's continue back to a regular episode.
Because some materials, like nicely paved streets, are nicer. They're just nice to look at. We like this texture. We like nature. We like water. We like, fountains. We like also texture and detail in buildings. We like certain proportions. So I think it's perfectly possible to create beautiful plazas. But that's just a little square. Think of a street. In a street, you want to have a lot of doors. You want to have some defensible space for the houses in front, where maybe people can put like a little chair where they can sit. And like in my street, you have a lot of like a very narrow band where there's some pots, some plants. Some people put a little bench, so they can sit there, and it makes it cozier and more friendly. So in a good street you have doors, so there's actually something happening. You have eyes on the street, so you feel safe. You have this kind of this little bit of greenery between the building and the street. It can be literally like 20 centimeters, but something. And you have wide sidewalks, so you can walk there, and a nice decoration of the street. So not like the minimalist lighting fixtures, but a little bit more detail. And then you have a street also where you want to stay, where you want to, stay to talk for a minute with your neighbor. Because nowadays it's all like service entries, garages for cars. It's windy, like you have these towers overhead, so like the human skill has also been lost. You have one entry with 200 letterboxes, and it's this big glass slab. So there's not like all these doors where people come in and out, maybe a little corner shop. It's just this one street with a lot of also like these what's it called, like grates, like doors for machinery and stuff, the doors where you see like watch out electrical utilities, all these utilities worked out in the facade. So you have these very dark, unpleasant, windy, anonymous places which you're creating. And so yeah, and it's also not clear. So is this the front of the building or the back of the building? Because now it's all like towers that are built sometimes in a traditional closed building block, but there's not like, oh, this is the front of the house, that's the back of the house, this is public, that is private, there's no distinction anymore. So all these things go wrong now. So it is perfectly possible to design a great street that feels nice, but there's no interest in it as well.
Yeah, I like this idea that you painted with the giant letterbox wall.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I lived in an apartment building, and I open up my phone and I see all the Wi-Fi all the signals that are around me. And I was thinking, like, how many of these people do I know? I'm sitting in their Wi-Fi signal, and it's radiating all through my living area, and I don't even know these people. And our ideas as well is very compartmentalized, but also very economic. That we put people into boxes, and we stack those boxes up as high as possible, just so that we can save on ground resources, or it's all very economically driven.
It's cost cutting. It's what is the word rendement?
Interest.
It's like interest-seeking behavior. Everybody just wants to seek rent-seeking behavior.
Right.
They want to just extract buildings as an economical resource, but they're not about creating communities.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point, because that mindset is very much a mindset of scarcity. While if you turn it around and you do what you said with the mall, you make the nice plaza and people want to reside there, and all of a sudden you have a mindset of abundance. I can attract all these people. I can attract a vibrant environment.
Exactly. That's a really good observation, I think, because it is indeed like it speaks of the extreme insecurity of the designers and also of the developers, like, oh, we just need to, we need to make this as tall as possible, because otherwise we're not going to get our money, and we're going to just make it efficient, and then we'll get our money, like this, forcing it. But then they create a place that they'll sell it, and then they can move on like a big grasshopper to the next place. But if you if you actually have a plan and a long-term vision, and you work as a municipality with a very clear plan of, we're going to make this place valuable, we're going to make sure that people want to come here, and we're going to make it beautiful. That's what happened in Le Plessis Robinson in France, where they did this, and it worked so well that it's become a magnet. Like, more and more projects are being built. Like, it's a success. They're building more beautifully, a little bit kitschy perhaps. Like, it's not like all the details aren't really right of the buildings, and it could be better, but
it's the French, so they're allowed.
but they're also, that they're just having fun there. They're like, this works, people are buying this, we're creating places where people want to live, and it works so well that they just keep on. They take a whole block with old Soviet blocks almost, very ugly flats, take it out, sometimes they just revamp it, sometimes they demolish it, and they replace it with beautiful French looking buildings, and it works, and they move to the next project, and slowly but surely they're actually redeveloping the whole town like this. And they're not stopping, and it's because this one mayor is doing this, and he sees it working, and now neighboring municipalities are also doing it. So we see that it's possible. It's actually, they're earning money doing it, and it's this abundance theory. And the second one is Cayala in Guatemala, where it's so successful that the developers are getting so greedy that they want to squeeze the last bit of real estate out of it. They want to build higher and higher and higher, because it's so loved, the first part, where they built only up to 4 floors. And it's become so bad that actually Leon Krier, the big, traditional planner, the genius planner who also worked on Poundbury, he quit his job there, because he was like, I'm out. I don't want towers. This doesn't build community. This is greedy developer behavior, and I want nothing to do with it. He's very, very, like on his principles about that, and it's good, because he wants to keep a clean conscience. But that's just because the first part works so well, and because it's so beautiful, and you can hire architects all you like to make something beautiful, but you still need to protect a certain human skill to keep it from getting too big and getting too...
Where's the limit? Have you identified a limit?
Well, I think, everything above 6 or 7 stories will be too tall.
Right.
But preferably, if you really want to have a cozy place, some places should be not taller than 4. But you can also make stories very tall. You know, you can trick a little bit with like having stories that look double as tall as they are, and then have like a floor in between. There's some tricks like that you can do, but it's more like for if you have a restaurant, you know, with an extra floor. You can make 6 floors extremely tall. Go to Florence, you see these palazzos with huge, like 10-meter ceilings.
Yeah.
So that's like the other extreme. But like with 3 stories, like you see like 30 meters, like a huge building, but it's only 3 stories. So you can do a lot with that. But I think for how many stairs do you want to walk? How tall does a tree grow? You don't want to take your groceries more than 5 stairs, you know. 7 stairs is still possible, but in that case you want an elevator. There's a reason why most old cities had a limit of like 7 stories, and then it kind of stopped because no one wanted to go higher. And I mean, you could go higher because cathedrals are taller, of course, but in ancient Rome they went up till 10 floors. But that was at some point like, it got really overcrowded. And I think Emperor Augustus at some point said, you know, like this is the maximum, because there were these fires and many people were dying, you know. So then they said, like, okay, and then later emperors actually lowered the maximum height again, because, well, they didn't have elevators, they didn't have sprinklers. Nowadays, the sky's the limit. We have the Burj Khalifa, 828 meters, 160 floors, you know. Try getting down when there's a fire there. So I don't know, like I would feel uncomfortable living in an elevator, because imagine there's like a big power outage if you're in an elevator, you know, or there's a fire. It's pretty scary. And here I might survive a fall from my window, you know. Maybe up here I could climb on the roof and go to another place. So there's
So
there's limits.
Again, we kind of the same thing with the building materials, where we distinguish the traditional from the modern. The same thing is happening with the technology. It's okay to have an elevator, but you don't want to be dependent on it. You don't want it to be something that is forming the way that you live.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a really good point as well. So I think, of course, you can use all these technological measures and optimize everything to be built for it, but you will run in kind of natural problems and kind of the limits of what a city can kind of handle. And of course we can go much denser. So in Paris and Barcelona we have incredible densities. In some places even higher than even Manhattan. There's a lot of offices there as well, of course. But then here in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, we're building a place, the Merwede Canal zone, and I calculated it will be denser, much denser than even the densest parts of Barcelona and Paris. And I think it will get very shadowy and dark. I think you can go too far with how many people you can cramp in a little place. And they want to solve the housing crisis, I know, but I think it's better for the city to showcase really from how good of a place, how attractive of a place, how beautiful of a place can we create. And that is not even in the question. People don't talk about beauty anymore. They find it a very scary word, because beauty shames the ugly. You know, if you build something beautiful, that means that there is something that is ugly and that is very conflicting, because then, this beautiful street building thing proves that was which was done lazily or in an ugly way is inferior, and we can have that. Everything, we were living in a relativistic time. Everything should be the same, you know. We should have, everything should be, there is no good or wrong, you know. There is no ugly or beautiful. But I think we're hurting people like that.
Do you see this as a discrepancy that lives in the academic world or in the public servant world, or where does this
I think the most, well, I wouldn't call them simple, I highly respect them, like the simplest bricklayer. I would love to lay bricks one day, by the way, one time. But
you're welcome.
Yeah.
On my off-grid place, where I'm gonna do everything self, you're welcome to come lay bricks.
It would be great, but I would first need to learn how to do it.
Me too.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we will hire a craftsman.
Yeah.
Like every bricklayer knows that there is good and evil and beautiful and ugly, but then once you have a master's degree, then that's suddenly not the case anymore. You know the bell curve meme.
Right.
I always think of the bell curve meme, and on the two outer ends, people know, there's ugly and beautiful, but in the middle, everything has to sound intellectual. It has to sound agreeable to what you might read in the intellectual newspapers opinion pages. Kind of this intellectualism that ignores truth, in my view. Maybe I'm just too stupid.
Could be.
It could be. Could very well be.
It could be very.
I'm probably too stupid to understand this, but I do believe in something like beauty, and that there's some things are more beautiful than others, because it's simply, if you look at the numbers, it's a numbers game. We can maybe now look at the polls.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of polls where we see that simply a large majority of the population prefers certain types of buildings and certain aesthetics. And the funny thing is, these polls are consistent among many continents and countries.
So where do these polls come from?
So this is a poll by Create Streets. This is a UK consultancy firm that does a lot of research and kind of looks what kind of places are pleasant. What do people find pleasant? They do a lot of literature review, but also direct polling. So here they compared 4 types of housing, and they asked what people like most. And well, the pastiche, as they call it, or the fake Disneyland new traditional architecture was most popular, but they didn't get any awards. But the award-winning architecture that was modern and very
extravagant
and basically modern and special, was not liked as much. It's always like a 70-30% change.
And the Disneyland example is interesting because apparently we do it at theme parks.
Exactly, and theme parks, they know exactly what people like.
Yeah.
They do a lot of research into what people like, and they actually are in the business of creating experiences. And I'm a little bit like that I think we should make the city a nice experience, but not as extreme as, our Dutch architect Sjoerd Soeters, he made like the building in Zandvoort with the flags, and the in Zaandam with all the green houses, and
right.
I think that is a rather successful plan, by the way, in Zaandam, but it's a lot of the things there are very kitschy and kind of, it's like this postmodernism. But I do think that a city should be a pleasant experience.
Right.
It should not be designed as a theme park, but it should design for pleasantness. Otherwise you have hostile environments, and it's where people live, their daily lives. Why should it be hostile? You want people to have a pleasant life, or you're anti-human, I think. So those are overindulgent in this experience creation, but you can also just make it very beautiful, and then it will be an experience, but not like, oh look, this is the theme of this place, Although I do believe that it is very efficient or effective to create like in a park-like setting. If you go to in Haarlem, you have this beautiful park with the Canalplein or something, or the Canalstraat, with these lofty white buildings along the park. And in Amsterdam, you have the Plantage Parklaan, also with beautiful lofty white buildings facing this greenery. And I think that's kind of like a type of architecture that goes very lofty, goes well with parks. And then maybe in another area you can have like more intimate brick buildings that have a slightly different aesthetic. So you can like create different experiences. But in general, theme parks know what they're doing, and people pay big money to go to Disneyland. So we know it works.
Yeah.
And this is it's always a very popular thing to shout by architects, like, oh yeah, modern architects, by the way, and only a specific subset, the Black Glasses Brigade, some other architects call them, which I find very funny. They always have these big black glasses,
I
you know,
see, I
and
see.
turtleneck, you know,
Yeah,
black
yeah, yeah.
turtleneck.
There's a particular kind of artist as
Yeah.
well that identifies like this.
Exactly, and kind of snobbish, you know.
Yes.
And they go, oh, that's Disneyland, that's pastiche, that's you know,
Right.
that's you know, for simple people.
Right.
Meanwhile, they'll live in a beautiful classical building themselves.
Yes.
But the point is, what these people cannot, should not ignore, what they cannot deny, is that their architecture is not popular. It is built for their clique, for their group. So here you see an American, so this is the Harris poll, which is a very big poll, very prestigious, and they did a huge sample size. And we see that 72% of the overall population of the United States prefers traditional architecture and only 18% prefers modern. And then you think, okay, but this is probably, they're all Trumpers, you know, like there's
Right.
only Trumpers.
Right.
But then you
The
look
deplorables.
at exactly the deplorables. But then you look at political parties. It's the same for the Democrats. 30% of Democrats actually prefer modern architecture, and 70% of Democrats also prefer traditional architecture. And we see this everywhere. Then we look at Sweden, one of the most progressive countries on earth. We look at one of their polls, which neighborhood they liked more. Same thing. They looked at all these different neighborhoods, and of course, so the traditional ones are far more popular than the modern ones with the very expressive architecture.
Yes.
Although,
So I have to
yeah.
pick up a little bit on my Swedish here. The Stiefvaarten, the
Yeah, Mellangatan, the Vegagatan, the Storgatan, and the Theatergatan. So the funny thing is that people tend to like more recent modern architecture better because it hasn't degraded yet, I think. And it's quite kind of, some modern architecture can also like trend towards almost have some classical elements. Like in the Netherlands we have a lot of brick modern architecture. So they're like very minimalist blocks, but they have some dark brick. So they look a little bit, you know, traditional-ish,
yeah.
but they're not. They're still very much modernist.
Right.
But you can tweak them and make them more traditional by adding some elements and introducing some proportions, and then they can become quite agreeable and quite okay.
Is there a connection here perhaps with fashion? For instance, that certain buildings are in the fashion of the times?
Yes. Oh yeah, definitely. Now you had like a Zaha Hadid with her Blob architecture. Guess what all the young architects in architecture school look at for inspiration? You know, they're not doing nothing but going on Pinterest, looking up what kind of things are being built right now and take inspiration from that and like, oh, I want to design that kind of stuff. So they have this kind of this star-architecture mindset. So star architect,
Right.
the star-architect,
Right.
the Rem Koolhaas, the God, what are all their names?
I've seen this a lot in art schools as well, where
Yeah.
young people come in and the first thing that they're being told is, you are the promise of the future.
Oh,
you
yeah.
are the new thing that's
Yeah.
going to happen. And you better fulfill that promise.
Exactly, and express yourself. You know,
Exactly.
let your creativity go free, and meanwhile, the real skills they know. Often they are also quite hungry to understand how a building actually works. They want to get into those brick walls or those details, because there's a large part of it is just doing it on paper and then do it in Revit and doing it in AutoCAD. But do they really touch the materials? Do they really see how it works? Some of them will go that far. You know, they will actually go, and because you have like details also showcased in the university building. But going on a construction site and really seeing how it's being built, and also learning how traditional buildings are made. Like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
I would dare to say that over 90% of architecture students, perhaps even more, 95, 98%, has no idea how traditional buildings were built and how they actually work. Like, actually really the stones and how they connect the material, like that deep knowledge. That's something where you need mastery.
I mean, the limestone mortar
Yeah.
alone is a brilliant example.
Yeah, things like that, exactly.
It's almost like we've lost the craft. We need to do archaeological research to understand the craft.
Well, the funny thing is that in the same universities you have these very smart and talented and knowledgeable renovation architects who know a lot about renovation and a lot about old buildings, how they're built and how they work. So those students will know this, you know, but they will only use it for renovation purposes. they will not use it for new buildings. So I say, like, why not teach about those basics very early on? You know, let the students build something actually out of brick or out of, you know, make sure that they really master it. But also, where's the mastery of proportion? All the architects before, let's say, I don't know exactly when they stopped teaching the classical curriculum, but at some point in the 20th century, they didn't learn anymore how to create a Doric order, for example, or a Corinthian order, and how to apply it in a building. And
sorry, what are those orders?
So those are like architectural orders, like you have, for example, a pillar, like a Doric pillar. So in classical architecture, you have what is called the classical orders, and they're basically different vocabularies or different dialects, you could almost say, of classical architecture. So you have like the Ionic order is like a dialect of how you combine different classical elements together into one type of architecture. Yeah. So you have a different capitals, but also the architrave will look different, the frieze will be different, and the proportions of the whole thing are different. So you have the Tuscan order, which is very squat and strong, and like for countryside architecture. Then you have the Doric order, which is a little bit more slender, but still quite sturdy. So it's like the masculine order. It also symbolizes masculinity, and it has triglyphs. So it has like these
icons.
Yeah. So this has like a different set of proportions. And then you have the very fancy order, the Corinthian order, with all these acanthus leaves, again with a different architrave, a different cornice with different elements. So each of these orders has their own rules.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of variation between the different Corinthian orders, but there's always kind of you know that the Corinthian order will be more slender than the Ionic, and the Ionic will be more slender than the Doric. So there's this system of building, this language. And this language, it takes years to master this, to really understand, to be able to draw it, to be able to play with it, to understand all the elements, because you know you have the columns, but the columns sit on pedestals. And then often above a frieze you will have a pediment, which is like this triangular element.
Yeah.
And then you have, then you have balustrades. And you need to be able to combine these into a building and keep the proportions in the right way, which is a real puzzle, which is also fun actually. But this is not done anymore in modern architectural education. So students will need to go to summer schools to learn this. But this is the beauty of classical architecture. It's like this, you can also use these proportions and then strip it down, you know, take all the ornament away, but you will still have classical proportions which will look good naturally.
Yeah.
So you can literally build a modernist building. Well, I'm not sure if it will be modernist in that case, because modernist, I think, implies that you on purpose cut ties with all classical or all anything that is traditional. But you could build a modernist looking building with classical language, and it will look very proportioned and harmonious, I believe, because it also uses like symmetry. Symmetry is inherent to the classical language, and in modernism, especially the more expressive later modernism, they want to take all symmetry away. So you get these very wonky, playful buildings. In Eindhoven, for example, where you see it has almost become like childlike, completely arbitrary where you place windows. And nowadays you have this, well, I call it the disease, that they want to playfully put all these windows, you know, like chaotically in the facade, just to have some visual interest.
Right.
But I think it just creates a chaotic facade that kind of, well, you know exactly what is built in like the 2000s, because those little, you know, those jumpy windows, they're everywhere.
Right. It's not like visual interest cannot be made in a pleasant, orderly way.
Exactly. It's disorder, it's chaos.
Yeah.
And it's kind of embracing the chaos.
There's this tradition with Buddhist monks who are given a mandala to look at.
Yeah.
And all they do is they sit and meditate, and they only look at the mandala. And first there's a whole boring part where you know nothing's happening, and all of a sudden the mandala starts to communicate with them.
Oh wow.
And there's this inclination that studying a certain shape, it will integrate into your mind, and so it will shape your mind, it will shape your brain waves. So if our tradition is to constantly move away from harmonic structures, you can imagine what it
Yeah.
would do to someone if you only let them listen to atonal music, for instance.
Oh yeah, we go insane.
I mean,
Yeah.
imagine that's the only thing that you're allowed to study. Imagine
Oh
that's
yeah,
the only
and that's
thing.
in music. That's the way in music.
Exactly.
Like modern classical music is, I think, by definition atonal because it's the way modern music is made. And if you want to make harmonic music, you are in great trouble. But yeah, I don't know anything about the world of music, but I can fully understand. And also just imagine living in a Gothic world and every day or every Sunday going to the cathedral and looking at all these, all this Gothic ornamentation, and like or just focusing on the rosette window of a church.
Sure.
There's also an extreme amount of very esoteric knowledge, I believe, that went into the construction of the cathedrals. It was a real secret passed on from master to student in a chain of generations, which is something we have kind of lost.
Yeah.
And that is also something very sad. Like there's so much beautiful knowledge that is not taught anymore. And I think coming back to the university is, I think that students, like this classical language is really something you can master. You can put your teeth in it. It's a challenge, and it's a wonderful challenge. It's like a rabbit hole you go into, and it's something of beauty. It's something that is not like, oh, that's because they will immediately scream, well, the whole political thing, like it's white supremacy and this and that. It has nothing to do with that. Like in the United States, it was the architecture of democracy.
Right.
But it's also like this. It's just like a thing you can like nerd out on. You can just
it's
go
an
full nerd on it.
opportunity
Yeah.
to rise up to.
Yeah.
It's a challenge to embrace.
To master.
Exactly. Yeah.
To become master of a language.
And I also believe it has something to do with mental health. I also believe it has something to do with, like, if we look at an architect, at the product of an architect who, for instance, has let's take this white building.
Yeah.
That's in England. They have not considered the environment that they're in. They have you can see a detachment from where they're in. And so what does it say about the detachment of the person who came up with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not integrated. And so I often think that what we see, what we are building into our environment, it's a mirror of what we have been telling ourselves on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're back with our official sponsoring block. Of course, you know our great sponsor, druidsecret.com. druidsecret.com for all your medicinal secrets that you might need for the modern age. Today, I want to highlight one particular kind of medicine that's on this website. And I've talked about this before, but let's scroll down to this website so you can just easily scroll down. You see a little bit of all the things that they have with the health stuff, with the mushroom kind of elements, and then you have the cannabinoids, which also includes a wide range of CBD oils, but then you have the Pro HHC, and this in particular, and I want to talk about the Pro HHC. You have the 10%, you have the 20%, so let's click the 20%. Good friend of mine, she is a terminal, she has been for the last couple of years, and she has decided not to treat herself in a hospital with modern medicine, and she has decided to take her own route. And by doing that, I advised her to at least take a look at the Pro HHC. She has confirmed back to me that it has helped her very much to sleep in the evening. She also takes CBD with particular band-aids. In the evening, she takes the Pro HHC, and she said it definitely helps to get through the night because, sleepless nights because you're in agony, you're in pain, that's not a comfortable thing to have. It just goes to show that for people who have a severe illness that is difficult to deal with on a regular basis, there are solutions out there that can help the pain, that are not invasive for the body, that are natural, and that can have a severe benefit. So just to go to show that there's a wide range of options out there. If you're in any kind of situation where you need something to help you out, just go to druidsecret.com, use the code Paradigm Shift, you get a 5% discount. With that, you're also helping out the show, you get a quality product, and therefore, 1 and 1 and 1 is 3. We're all helping each other out. It's a mom and pop store. It's not just one big conglomeration of pharmaceutical people who are in there. It's an honest, healthy store, and I'm very happy to recommend those to you, and I'm very happy to be associated with this product. So with that, let's continue back to our episode.
Yeah, and I think perhaps the architecture of this day is a pretty good reflection of where we are as a society. I think that is an accurate statement. So I always rage a little bit against the zeitgeist idea of like Hegel, that like there's always like that every age produces its own forms and arts and everything. And I think it is, in a way, it is probably true, but it should not become a circular argument. So, we are in this age, so we should produce more of it. No, that's kind of that actually stifles the whole process of the zeitgeist, where ages should produce new things, We've been rehashing the same type of architecture for so long now. Modernism isn't new anymore. It's old news, like it's over. We should do something new, and I think we can also decide, like, do we want a pessimistic architecture or an optimistic architecture? Do we want something that uplifts us or something that crushes us down? And I think that if we want to usher in a new age, then maybe we should usher in a new architecture, for example, by looking at Art Deco again. So pick up where we left, learn the classics, master what we did. I mean, we did it in the Renaissance, so we can have another one where we study really well, we master it, and then we can, at some point, we can make better stuff than they could,
Right.
That's literally what they did in the Renaissance. They just studied the classics, they studied ancient Roman architecture, and they were trying to recreate it, and at some point they were really, like emulating it, and at some point they were going into the Baroque, and they were playing with it, and then you get Rococo, they mastered it so well that they could just break the rules again.
Yeah. They reinvented themselves.
Exactly, and then we got Baroque, which was a new style, and then we got Rococo, it was a new style. So we can do the same. We can pick it up, and then we can use it in countless forms. I mean, Art Nouveau, Art Deco, they both use the same language, and of course in a different way, in different ornament, and it looks different because they used it in a different way, but underneath it is a basis, is a foundation of classical proportions.
Yeah.
If we use the classical proportions and we go look at Art Deco, for example, it has ornament with trains, airplanes, like very modern things, electricity, the radio, like they were representing in symbols all these things of the new modern age. We could do that as well, we can symbolize like robots and AI and, I don't know, smartphones if they're worth it, but we can symbolize all these things in ornament, and then we can basically, we take that style, we make it our own again, and then we just let it develop. But we need a language first that is able to create with that language new styles, because our modernism doesn't have this underlying, it's kind of, modernism is a negation of language.
Right.
It says we don't want to use this language, we do everything but it.
Right.
So we will not do symmetry, we will not do this system, we let go of the system, we'll not use ornament, we'll not use like composition, but like in a very playful way, so like Mondrian did, kind of in an abstract way. But if we take up this, we need to have this language if we want to make coherent, harmonious styles that will actually blend in really well with what is already there.
It seems to me that the only progressive thing to do at this point in time would be to to move again towards harmony.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, they have this idea of progress that it just should be different, but different isn't always better. Progress should indeed be improvement, and improvement towards what? There's a goal, like it implies a line towards something. And now it's just, we need to do something different because it's the year 2025. Let's make a green duck-shaped building now because at least it's different.
Yeah, it hasn't been done before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is the bar really so low? You know.
Right.
Should we not have a higher bar and see? Okay, you know, like we want improvement. We want buildings that are beautiful. We want buildings that people love. We want to build the most beautiful building. Maybe that's a good progress goal, you know, and not just is it different. It's a very bad definition of what what is progress.
Yeah.
So I agree fully. Progress should mean that we're going towards something that is better, and I think that is towards more harmony. And yeah, I don't know. Like we live in a very unharmonious time, but maybe that we need like an antidote to all that chaos in our world.
Well, it's up to the people.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're talking now architecture, but
Yeah.
we could have the same conversation about art. We
Yeah.
could have the same conversation about car design.
Yeah.
You could even have it about philosophy.
Yeah.
There is a kind of substructure that has fallen away.
Yeah.
That and this is why I really love your work, and I really love the mission that you're on, because I love all of the history and the culture that Europe has to offer.
There's so much there.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And
it's all like, well, we don't need it anymore. You know, we can do better stuff. Yeah.
What a great tragedy to neglect everything that our forefathers have given to us.
It's neglect.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's disrespectful. It's neglect. And the funny thing is, so first of all, I think that beauty is equitable. You know, like beauty should be for everyone, and we should look in the now. We should make sure that everybody has the same access to beauty. I think because like that's literally what we did in the early 20th century. All those socialists, you know, like the early socialists, Amsterdam Zuid, like the southern expansion part of Amsterdam. Maybe it's cool to show some graphics. Those were built as palaces for the workers, for the laborers.
Right.
So the labor palaces, let's say.
Yeah, it's a very socialistic ideal.
Exactly. And you had the whole arts and crafts movement, also from the early 20th century, was super socialist. You know, beauty should be for everyone and not only for the elite. And so that's one thing. But nowadays, so I actually agree with that idea. You know, beauty should be for everyone. So well, call me socialist if you want. But then you have on that front at least. But then you have just the fact that I want humans, any human, to have a pleasant life. I want them to live in a nice place. I want them to be healthy. I want them to be able to raise kids and have a family if they want. I want them to, you know, be in a park and feel safe and feel free, you know, to do what they want. So I don't know what exact philosophy that is. Maybe humanism or something else.
Well, it's interesting. Because I can make the same argument. I mean, you did a good job of underlaying the socialist idea.
Yeah.
But I can make the same argument from a very capitalistic idea.
Yeah.
Because what type of houses sell in the center of Amsterdam? They're the canal houses, the ones that people from all over the world, they come and to see it, because it's like it's like open air Disneyland kind of. But it's like, and then. What we have is a river flowing through Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the river we have Amsterdam North.
Yeah.
And Amsterdam North is always looked upon like, oh yeah, we also have that part.
Yeah, exactly. We forget it.
And the architecture that you see there, I mean, the architecture that is there traditionally are like the more...
the Van der Pekbuurt is kind of nice.
Yeah, well, and you have a little bit of...
The old part,
Yeah, the old parts feel a little bit more like a village.
Exactly, yeah.
And then the new architecture that is built there right now, it's I mean, I have this particular example in mind where I see this house in front of me, and the walls, it's like artificial grass.
Oh yeah.
They
yeah.
put like artificial grass
my
on the
goodness.
walls. Like, why do we do this? Like, if we
Yeah.
want to expand this city and they want
Yeah.
to pull the north back to the rest of Amsterdam, they're
Yeah.
trying to connect it up. If we want to do that, then what would be the most logical thing to do? Then dig a canal,
Exactly. Extend the canal ring.
extend the canal ring, make it an actual ring, complete
Yeah.
the ring,
Exactly.
build more canal houses that you know people are going to live, make them a bit more spacious inside,
exactly,
you know,
yeah.
a nice bathroom, and
Yeah.
not have all the problems that you
Yeah.
have with the traditional canal houses,
Yeah.
and like sell them to expats.
Exactly. Yeah. Have
There's
some social housing, you know, for some people, because then it needs to be like it would be a nice opportunity to actually have people live in such a place in a fair way, but like make it mix, you know, like some expats, some locals. But in any case, it's the most logical thing to do, and I have thought about this as well. Exactly the same idea, and I think a lot of people have done so, but logical thought is not there anymore. So like it's of course now it's too late, because you would need to demolish probably big parts, but you can still build places that feel like Amsterdam, that refer to Amsterdam,
yeah.
in the north of the of the city. But yeah.
Well, there's an example of this.
Yeah.
So if we take Amsterdam as an
Exactly.
example,
Yeah, they actually did it, the Houthavens.
yeah. And what they did here, they built a neighborhood, and in that neighborhood, they try to have every street, try to have it like a little bit of a nod towards all the different architectural style
Yeah.
that Amsterdam has.
Yeah.
And what we're looking at right here is one of the former warehouses,
Yeah.
or that it's based on.
Yeah. So the warehouse architecture. Yeah, and I must say, I know a lot of people who have complaints with this, and I think, of course, it's not perfect.
I have complaints with this.
Yeah.
I'll try to
Yeah.
vocalize my complaint a little
Yeah,
bit, and
yeah.
then I'll have you chip in, because I'll try to do this in the video. I'll try
Yeah.
to put a side-by-side comparison of
Yeah.
it. You can see the old architecture, you can see the new ones, and first of all, I think the road is not integrated.
Yeah.
I think the brick texture is completely wrong.
Yeah.
It's too busy.
Yeah.
If it needs to look like a warehouse, it like,
Yeah.
let's say if I'm building a type of boat that is a tugboat,
Yeah.
right? And then I want it to look like a tugboat.
Yeah.
Then I want it to be
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if I'm gonna paint the thing pink, then people are gonna say, "Oh, it's a nice boat," but what a strange
Yeah.
color.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel there's something
Yeah.
restless within me when I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
For the rest, I love the step forward.
Yeah. Yeah. It is indeed. It's certainly, it could be much better, and there's details that are not right, but I think we're in such a bad situation right now that we cannot complain so much. Like, we have to do it with this, because the alternative is so much worse. This is really kind of you could almost call it a gem in how, just in this landscape of extremely bad architecture and urbanism. But you know,
Have we lost it? Have we lost the original touch?
well, most have. I think we can still restore it. It's just like, you just need to observe, learn from it, analyze and apply. That's the thing. You need to observe, analyze, apply, and then you can actually you can build like that again. But you need to very closely analyze and be very smart in how you emulate it, that it works in the modern economy. But I think the modern economy and how development works nowadays, and also how you can get things done in the municipality, in the city, is so difficult nowadays that it's really hard to get there. You need someone with a long-term vision, with a lot of power, let's say, who's able to, to push this through, to make sure that there's someone looking at all the details and, saying, no, this needs to be redesigned. And I think that is only possible in in certain ideal conditions.
This is where people get afraid of authoritarians.
Yeah.
people that have so much power that can actually do that kind of thing.
Yeah, the point is, I think the point. It needs to be. We should not have one person doing this. We should have enough people with enough common sense that our society produces good places naturally.
Yeah.
So I think it's an education problem, and I think we need a big overhaul of our universities once again.
Yeah.
Because that's where the problems start. If you don't educate people in the right way, like you get all these wonky situations, and then you get like a one-off that is done decently but not really well. Even like the most traditional plants in the Netherlands, like Brandenvoort, they're pretty good, but they're very rural. They're not very urban, so they're maybe not the best example for a big city. But I think in Berlin they seem to have a pretty good guideline for, we're gonna build up to like 8 stories. It's like the natural height of all the buildings, and we're gonna like they're gonna have this rhythm, they're gonna have these set of rules, and you can basically create like a pattern book for a place with all these materials you want to use, window proportions, type of like cornices, gables, what kind of window partitions you use, doors, colors, paints, types of streets, and like how the street is made, and what kind of lamppost you have. And with such a pattern book, and you can also make a little different, you can vary between different neighborhoods. You can say, we're going to build, and architects are free to build whatever they want as long as they keep to those rules within that, and use that pattern book for their designs. And then they can make bigger buildings or smaller buildings, but it all should fit within that pattern, that language. Use that language, and then naturally everything will kind of really nicely harmonize with each other. So I think that would be one way to go about it. And pattern books are being used for some plans, but it's not a very common thing yet. And then what we can do is have visual preference studies. So ask people, what would you like?
Right.
Give people some input. Do you want this kind of architecture or that? And make it fair. Don't offer 3 modern options, but have maybe 1 modern or 2 modern and 3 traditional ways of building.
Yeah. Because the plea that we're having right now is not a plea for not experimenting.
Yeah, exactly.
There should be space for that.
Like Art Deco at some point was introduced, and it was an innovation, and we can have new innovations like Art Deco that will look nice. My biggest problem is with modern materials and how things are like made in such an industrial way. With current prices of labor, it's just really hard to get a lot of craftsmanship, and we also don't teach enough craftsmanship. So we need to also make craftsmanship cool again. We need to make it prestigious. I would say, like, let's build huge schools everywhere with beautiful buildings. Prestigious schools where we start to educate master masons, master bricklayers, carpenters, and make it a very prestigious, like École des Beaux-Arts like thing, that if you finish there, that every construction company wants you to teach your employees and stuff. But we also need, I think that maybe we're gonna get robots in a couple of years. I'm pretty sure that it will happen.
Yeah.
And because AI is coming, and I know a lot of people who say, like, no, we should not. You can never like put your spirit in buildings. You can never put soul in a building with a robot, but you can lower construction costs, and maybe designers can steer robots and like direct their soul into these buildings. But there is a technical solution, perhaps. Basically robot slaves, you could say, who can build the most crazy cathedrals, literally, because cost of work is going to go down dramatically.
And not only that, a computer would be completely fine with understanding a pattern book.
Exactly. Yeah. It can generate one soon, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm generating pictures with my phone on classical, beautiful buildings, it will immediately understand what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
It might not be structurally sound, but it will definitely understand the difference.
Yeah. But here's a big philosophical debate, and I know there's I think most people in the traditional architecture space are very much pro-human and anti-AI, and I think it's also for good reason, because I think it's partly it's a very ideological idea, you know, like we don't want to give the last pieces of our humanity to the machine, and but I don't know, like I'm always a little bit more pragmatic, you know. So what if you have a master stonemason who has 3 robots who can work tirelessly and create his visions, you know, execute his visions in stone? You know, you could build the new cathedrals of the 21st century that will go beyond anything we've ever seen. Like if robots are indeed becoming a thing, like the Optimus bot by Tesla and whatever is being developed, and you have like you know, you always need to hand finish a lot of stone masonry things as well. Like I know a company in the US, for example, who creates with robots. They cut out the stone and then it still needs to be hand finished. So,
yeah.
But anyway, if you have all these things, you can build crazy buildings.
Yeah.
Just things that would not be possible by a long shot nowadays for you know, a budget that would be laughable.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that will be interesting to see if it happens, if we make it through this whole AI explosion. But to really make it look amazing, we will still need the human touch, and I think it will take quite a long time before real craftsmanship can be taken over by robots. I think it might never happen even, but never is a very dangerous word, you know. So
Yeah.
but at least the basics can be done by, like, you know, like the rough work can be done by robots, and then I think there will be opportunities here. But you don't need, for ornament, you don't need, not everything needs to be made out of stone, you know. Like with plaster and a mold, like a mold you can reuse 100,
Right.
1,000 times.
Yeah.
So ornament doesn't have to be expensive if you use molds. So
Yeah, just to counter the argument of what the architects who say, well, we need to have humanity in the design. I think we already lost it. When you, but I'm serious. When we think of, if we have compartmentalized our neighborhood so much that we say, well, this is the part where you live, this is the part where you shop, this is the part where you walk your dog, this is the part where, I mean, we've already designed that society for robots to live in. It's a very rational way of thinking, which is, you know, is not integrated for life. So we're already thinking that way. If we change that way of thinking, then we can integrate them, and then we can use them for a better way of doing so.
Yeah, it's not like complex. It's not. But I must say that urban design is moving back to complexity. Let's say, but it still wants to plan things top down. Like it's never really truly, you know, like they will say, okay, here we have here we want a shop, you know. So they make sure that the architect designs the bottom space of a building as that a shop or a workshop can be housed there. But we need to go to a place where that can happen later easily. You know, like it can be a house and then people can turn it into a shop. We need more lax regulations on those things. You know, you need to be able to just, you know, start a business easier and change it. But then, you know, having a nice shop front, of course, you want to have some guidelines on how to make it look nice.
Yeah.
Because now, by default, it can look very tacky and weird and ugly.
Yeah.
So that's also something, like the common sense has been lost, and I think that's something that's very sad. But I think literally a change of culture, like it can all happen. It's gonna all turn around. You know, it turned around once, and if there's a lot more education on this front, and the status quo will be to design things in a nicer way, things will happen like that. It's very much a cultural thing, and expectations of of a culture. And I think we're very early still with this whole move and this paradigm change. But I think there will be a paradigm change in architecture, and I think it is going to happen within 10 years, let's say. 10 or 20 years. Like it will be, first it will be slow and then all of a sudden. But I think the universities are a big one, and there's already the first stirrings are already happening. And I think that Gen Z is also far more traditional than our millennials and Gen X. And especially I think let's say the baby boomers are very, they were like the modernists, who create the world we live in now. But a lot of young people, they play games, they play Minecraft, they play Assassin's Creed,
Yeah.
They see all these beautiful medieval environments, and they want that, they want to know how to make that because they're inspired by it.
That's a very good point, and I'm intrigued by all of the things that young people are building in Minecraft.
Oh yeah.
It's and they're building it by hand.
Yeah.
They're placing it block for block.
Yeah.
They're very involved in shaping a environment, but they're doing it virtually.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're living in ugly houses.
Yeah. They ask, why can we not build like this in the real world? And we are organizing summer schools, for example, and there's quite some people who have this gaming background and they're inspired by gaming, by Minecraft. It's truly a revolution, and they are not brainwashed by this whole, it has to be like this. It's a new world, it's a new age. So I think that is the really what's gonna, I think Gen Z is really gonna be the new generation that's gonna learn this and master it at some point. And it's also it's literally a Harry Potter experience to dive into the old books and to gain all this almost mystical knowledge and to master something. Like, I think it's for a lot of very smart people, it's very disempowering, making you very cynical if you come to school and you discover you can just do anything you want, but there's no system to master, there's nothing to master, there's nothing to grab, nothing solid you can actually learn.
Yeah.
Because you have to express yourself and it's all free anyway, and just as long as it's not traditional, it's all good,
Yeah. And then you get an F and you don't know why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But people feel lost. I felt very lost in university because there was nothing to learn, master the Doric order, for example, or master making a building that really fits and everything is correct. The few places where I can do this is in like just the details, like creating how the insulation material, insulation material and the wall comes together, so you make like a section, and that's kind of something you can really get right or get wrong, but there's no good or bad, so if everything is allowed, it's all arbitrary, and it just depends on the teacher who you have in front of you, who says, okay, well, that's like this, and that you consider that, and they don't like something, so you don't pass, or they like your genius vision and you like it, but it's very arbitrary.
Yeah.
And I think that arbitrariness is also not fair, because if you master it really well, then you deserve a good point.
But if there's no measurement of standard
exactly
to measure it against, then how do you know?
There's no standards, exactly. So that is something that has bugged me, and I think that is something that a lot of students would feel really nicely. And then you always have the creative types who want to defy the rules.
Yeah.
That's now the standard quo. Everybody has to be that one defiant, creative, like that.
You have to be the rebel.
Yeah, you have to be the rebel.
Yeah.
Rebellion is the standard, but I think a lot of people aren't rebels. They try to be rebels, but they're not everybody is a genius. Geniuses are rare by default. And there is also a certain kind of genius that develops out of following rules very strictly and then becoming so good that you feel like, but wait a minute, I can do this and this and this. and I technically break the rules, but it's still within the train of thought. And I think like the many of the old architects, like I mean, there were great, like they were like the great geniuses who were able to do that because they were so good at it. And a lot of not so good architects, like the average architects, still produced very decent buildings that were really nice. And nowadays we would like, oh, that's a nice building,
Yeah.
designed by some nobody basically.
Yeah.
But it's still good enough, you know.
Well, and this brings me maybe to my last point, because I think we should tie a knot in
Yeah.
it. But you said something earlier
Yeah.
that triggered me a little bit. You said that architecture is still something, at least for the foreseeable future, that will have to be top down, or at least that's the way that we're still doing it right now. And I have plans to go off grid, and I have plans to make something myself, and maybe build something like it as an earthship, or maybe experiment and see what I can do.
Yeah.
And also I think with this new generation coming in, and people wanting to have more freedom, more liberty, like how our cities were built in the old days, where just, the neighbor built a house, I'm going to build a house.
Yeah.
And if you cannot build it yourself, you can hire an architect just to build your house.
Bottom up, I think ideally it's all bottom up, of course. I'm very against top down, because top down is basically how all the stuff that we don't like now is being forced down our throats. But if you do something bottom up, you need to have the right knowledge. So I think education is still important. But then we can look at people like Christopher Alexander with his pattern language, who basically had this whole book and like, hey, you have all these patterns which work well, and they hook into each other like a whole system. So you have like larger scale patterns, smaller scale, from literally a little step or like a little room, or just like a from the biggest city to just like a little part of a building.
Yeah.
All these patterns, they work together in one big system. So with the book A Pattern Language, you can design your own house, but then you still need to understand the system like as a whole. So it's still kind of tough. Like he tried to do this, Christopher Alexander, but he didn't really succeed in what he wanted. But I think it is the future that we need more knowledge about all this stuff. We need YouTube channels, we need books, we need very like attainable ways to design architecture in a fun way, and more people need to know about Christopher Alexander. But with that knowledge, I think anybody can build literal pieces of art. You have these hermit-like people who build their own castles in their backyards, like
right,
yeah, that kind of stuff, and they're kind of artworks, you know.
And so they get shut down by city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can still do that, and I think that will lead to proper, truly authentic architecture.
Right.
It might not always follow the rules, but it is truly authentic. But I think, just imagine what would happen if there's enough knowledge out there for everybody to use, to learn how to build this kind of stuff. I think that would be a great game changer.
Yeah.
So we need, I think we need, but that's the beauty of YouTube. We have this huge university, which is called YouTube, where you can learn everything from bricklaying to carpentry. But we also need masters. We need a system that creates mastery and excellence. Yeah. And this quest for excellence must go together with people having the freedom to do bottom-up stuff. And all these regulations that are choking us are they're one of the evils that need also to be, like with all this regulation that tries to make everything sustainable, but in a way it also hampers, it creates other problems like rising costs of construction and making it harder to build, and thus supports the housing crisis per se. So,
and then people settle for a prefab house.
Yeah.
Because
built in the factory.
Built in the factory, put it down in 4 days, and that's it. And you have an entire street full of them.
Yeah, and it's still an industry. It's still a capitalistic industry that produces these and you have the incentives are still designed in such a way that industry wins and humans kind of lose.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I agree. But I would also love to design and build my own home one day, which would be a fun project. But I would love to go and learn from a craftsman as well, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe that's next year or something. But I think there's a lot of very exciting things going to happen, and I think a lot of it is because of this bottom-up movement. And I already see more YouTube channels popping up, and you know, trying to get attention for this movement.
Yeah.
So I'm not alone anymore, and yeah, we need more communicators, we need more educators, and but we also need real change in schools and universities, I think.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely trying to do that with this channel, with with also relating the community to this channel, and trying to whenever we make a move to a foreign country, that where we're going off grid and we might have building project and everything. You're very welcome to be involved, to be a part of it. And the same extension goes to all of our viewers who want to chip in. And that's the mission of what we're trying to do here.
Fantastic.
And
Where will it be? Where are you gonna?
I'm looking towards the mid of Portugal.
Okay. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So
that's really nice.
Of course, we have to scout a good place. At the moment, I have a place to land, but I'm scouting for a place and also looking at building regulations and all of these things. But there's interesting projects going on and interesting opportunities out there. More than you will find here.
That sounds very exciting.
it very much is. It's very exciting and also thrilling.
Oh wow. I can imagine. Fantastic.
Thank you very much for today, for this conversation. And
thank you.
I hope you'll be back at some point.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So if you haven't yet, please leave a like on this channel. Under this episode. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Only click it once. If you click it twice, then you're unsubscribing, so don't let that be. Also, don't forget to visit our sponsors, which is druidsecret.com and organica-cbd.com. And also, if you want to support this channel and you want to view the episode without any ads, then go to patreon.com/paradigmshift for you. All right, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.